Hi, this is Lou Mirando. Welcome and thanks for attending today. We're very appreciative. This is our launch of our Visionary Series, CCL. I am a volunteer, but I am the chair of Fordham's EAC, Executive Advisory Council for its Real Estate Institute. Our membership consists of about 16 professionals and veterans of the business with a diverse background and storied careers, and all caring about teaching and caring about our community and our industry. My day job, I'm the CEO of Streamline Realty Funding, a national debt fund origination thing, and it's a privilege to serve Fordham University, its students, and the Real Estate Institute. A little bit on Fordham, private research university in New York. I consider it a local jewel. Both my mother and father have their roots in the Bronx and we visit it often. Established in 1841 and named for the Fordham Bronx neighborhood it exists in, rich and steeped in history. Probably what sums it up the most for me is there's an expression that brevity of speech requires clarity of thought, is when I was looking at some of the mission statements, quite frankly, a Jesuit institution mission statement is summed up very simply: strive for excellence in everything you do, care for others, and fight for justice. And boy, can we use some of that advice today. We have local campuses in Rose Hill in the Bronx, beautiful Lincoln Center in Manhattan, a facility in Westchester County, and we have teaching facilities all around the world, including Rome, London, and Beijing, so we have quite a national reach. Now, let's talk a little bit about the Real Estate Institute. Now, this is housed under what is known as our School of Professional and Continuing Education, and here I'd like to pay a certain shout out to Dean Anthony Davison. This is a man who I have found, I met him 4 years ago, uniquely entrepreneurial, a steady hand on the tiller at all times, and in 4 short years was able to recruit key real estate staff and teachers, and was able to he founded the Real Estate Center or Institute, and was able to launch our EAC. And a big shout goes out to Dean Davison. Without him, we would not be anywhere where we are right now in a short 4 years. And it's to his credit, and I enjoy working under his guidance. What we've actually managed to accomplish, and he was able to recruit Bob Morgenstern and Sal Verliano, both professionals in the teaching arenas in New York City. And we have been able to launch a master's in science in real estate investment, as well as construction management. We have advanced certificates, 15 credit certificates in a variety of topics. And we have great non-credit certificates that can get people interested in our business, summer intensives, and quite frankly, I love our high school outreach in the community. It's a credit to Fordham. What is Visionary CCL? Well, I'll tell you what it is. In July 4th, 2026, roughly 5 years from now, the country will celebrate what's known as the sesquicentennial, quarter millennium, 250th anniversary to keep it easy for me. And what VCCL is, and CCL is the Roman numeral for 250, is our 5-year mission to examine and shape the future role of this real estate industry, the commercial real estate industry. And I'm an optimist, and we need to have hope now. Sooner this starts to become brick and mortar events again, where we can maintain the human touch and meet new people, the better for us, better for our business, and better for society. We started this, we launched this, we have already 23 to 25 and growing committed professionals, accomplished visionaries in real estate and beyond have already agreed to sign in to this vision. And that's a credit again to Fordham, to the Institute, and to the Dean. And our one goal, and the reason we tie it into our 250th anniversary of this country, is we see the mission as forming a more perfect union is a journey. And what I like to attach, and that comes from our founding documents, what I like to attach to that, not only to seek a more perfect union, but for all seeking their dreams. And quite frankly, seeking their dreams, I can only think of Martin Luther King, which we recently celebrated his birthday, a really great American. And that's the thought and the principles that go into our vision. Now, how do we as Fordham, the Institute, the people here, how do we do our bit to contribute to this? And that's what we're introducing again in this 5 years, what we call Scholarship 250. It pays homage to our 250th anniversary. My goal and the goal for the institution is to try to raise $250,000 every year for the next 5 years if we can. And it's a 5-year call to action plan where we all can continue the unfinished work of creating a more perfect union. Now, often in our surrounding areas, all over the country, some people just don't have access to knowledge, contacts, or resources. We need to strive for inclusion into this important sector. This is a very undervalued important sector that can help rebuild our country and make it better. And all people are entitled to participate if they choose. Neighborhoods do wonderful when they begin to reinvest in themselves and they have ownership in their stakeholders. And it's something I really believe in. What I'd like to also point out, this whole effort has been a grassroots effort, and I'm so impressed, really led by our recent graduates, our current students. We have Executive Advisory Council, Fordham administration squarely in support, but I want to throw out a special thank to Jill Weston, Harvey Luck, Eric Solomon, and Albert Woon. These are recent graduates that really put all kinds of structure behind something to get this thing launched. We're not perfect yet, but we're going to strive to be perfect as this goes on for 5 years. The funds we raise under Scholarship 250 will be deployed in the surrounding neighborhoods to assist those who might not otherwise be able to explore this career. And our approach is very simple. We're going to conduct high school outreach initiatives, let people know what real estate is and the many, many opportunities it can bring to you, your family, and your neighborhood. We're going to award merit award towards degrees and certificates for those who sign up for our programs. And we'll continue to develop a mentorship relationship to help guide these next future leaders and perhaps the next visionaries who may be in front of the camera. Now, what I'm going to do is introduce the panel. And before I introduce them individually, it's going to be fairly short. I want to make something very clear. All of these people are visionaries. And I really mean that. That's not an exaggeration. All extremely accomplished. All responsible for job creation in their activities. And all generously agreed to join us because they believe in the same vision we have. I'm going to start with Father Joseph McShane, currently the 32nd president of Fordham, a graduate of prestigious Regis High School, holds advanced degrees from Berkeley, PhD from University of Chicago, was the president at University of Scranton. He sits on numerous and national boards and a real agent of change and a true champion of our principles. And I've only had the pleasure to meet him a few times, and you gotta like what you see when you meet him. Dottie Herman, CEO of Douglas Elliman. 7,000 real estate agents work for Dottie's company. She is the CEO of Douglas Elliman, one of the largest and oldest, most prestigious residential firms in the country and massive in the city. Average sales can be over $27 billion. Crain's ranked her always in the 50 most powerful women. Named 216 list of self-made women. Her philanthropic work is so extensive, I can't even list it all, but she's received the humanitarian award from the real estate board in New York. And I have to say, Dottie, even the fact that you handled your own Zoom today just tells me why you're so successful and why I consider you a visionary. Don Peoples, a person I got to meet about a year ago. I really admire this man. He's a real estate entrepreneur and author, political activist, chairman and chief officer of the People's Corporation, a privately held national investment development company specializing in residential, hospitality, real estate, and mixed-use commercial property. Founded in 1983, he's actively completed developments of $8 billion in gateway cities in New York, Boston, Philadelphia, Charlotte, Miami, and San Francisco, and Los Angeles. And he's guided by principles of the affirmative development. And I see it's been trademarked and it makes sense. And this has helped to empower women and minorities to close the wealth gap. And he's going to talk a little bit about how he's accomplished that. Now, I'm going to introduce the topic. It's really a workforce topic, and we titled it restarting the engine and propelling the economy. 2020 was difficult, to state the obvious. Pandemic, unrest, divided country, on certain global issues going on. And beyond the pandemic, there was many structural changes to the way commercial real estate industry was headed anyway, in terms of retail and introduction of technologies, and a lot of dislocation and a lot of migration, areas becoming less well and other getting more. And so we were on our way to some tough times. And we are a divided people. We really are a divided people. But we are Americans. We are citizens of this land. And what we propose going forward, the guiding principles of this talk, is there's three really great principles I'm drawing from now. One is our founding document, forming a more perfect union. The second one is protecting the pursuit of dreams of all people. I get that from Martin Luther King, one of my favorite Americans. And I go back to a very simple statement coming out of the Jesuit College of Fordham University: strive for excellence, care for others, and fight for justice. After I'm going to introduce Hugh Kelly now, and he's a member of the EAC, a PhD, a contributor to Emerging Trends, a great mind in the business, and he was able to put together just to kind of put together a snapshot economically where we are with the labor force. I asked him to do this a week ago, and typical Hugh Kelly, he always comes through. So I'm going to allow him to take you through a little bit of what he's seeing right now, and then we're going to get on to questions. Thank you very much. Thanks for everybody for being here.
Thanks very much, Lou. I'm going to share my screen. And hopefully we get ourselves going here. That's good. So yes, one of the things that's always attracted me to real estate in the sense of real estate economics is that it is very tangible economics. Numbers are numbers in mathematics, but numbers are people and places in real estate. And so, since real estate is really ubiquitous, and it's where we live, it's where we work, it's where we play, it's where we worship, it's where we learn. I'd like to take a look at this through the lens of where we stand in terms of employment very briefly today. And that means looking at employment in context. There's no gainsaying the damage that was done in the economic free fall that was triggered by the public health crisis we've experienced in the last 12 months. In retrospect, the steady but moderate growth of the past decade was truly a blessing, even if it didn't lead us to the greatest economy in history, as some might suggest. The thing about the slope of the 2010 to 2019 job growth was its apparent sustainability, and that gave us a great sense of confidence. But if the past year taught us anything, it's that we shouldn't be overconfident and extrapolating trend lines too far into the future. 2020 was a horrible year, to use a phrase that was initiated during Queen Victoria's reign. Virtually every segment of the economy at the end of 2020 was smaller than it was in 2019. It gives us a real pause in terms of its real estate effects. The job impact is huge. Even now, after that little upward movement that we saw in the previous graphs, we're still down more than 9 million jobs from a year ago. And some of these sectors are just terribly scarred. Of the 2.4 million jobs lost in restaurants and bars, that means that there are a whole bunch of facilities that have been shuttered and will not be opening again. That's real estate that's dormant, and that is going to need to be reimagined and reconfigured. In order to do that, we're going to need functioning governments, both at the state and local level, as well as at the federal level. And local government has been decimated. Nearly 1 million jobs lost in that area. The office market is suffering from the loss of more than 800,000 jobs. Some of them are jobs that are being performed remotely. But again, as long as people are on the payroll, they're not included in this number. These are people who have actually lost their employment over the course of 12 years, even though they were trained white-collar employees, ones that should have felt more secure in their employment. Hotels, really hammered more than any other real estate type, and the loss in jobs, many of which are jobs that are entry-level employment or employment for people who perform basic services for the guests in the hotels, are gone, and that is to the tune of nearly 700,000 people. Retail trade, we talk about pre-existing conditions in the health area. Retail trade's losses express a lot of pre-existing conditions. Already, this was an oversupplied sector. It was one that was in transition under the threat of e-commerce and had trouble with its own merchandising. And it's one that's going to be quite a while in finding its recovery. And strikingly, each one of those jobs losses is a personal story. Just as the Great Depression and 9/11 created a mindset that shaped expectations and behaviors for decades, that's a factor in our coming recovery period in the post-pandemic economy. It's going to require a lot of help, a lot of support, and it's discouraging to see that social assistance in the non-governmental sector has also been suffering a lot of attrition in the year. So there are challenges really ahead, but not to be too gloomy or too exclusively gloomy. We were reminded a long time ago by Monty Python that we should always look on the bright side of life. And despite my recital of bad news, by temperament, I'm a pretty optimistic person. We did have some areas of growth, even in 2020. We came to a new understanding of what essential workers might mean. All of those folks who are bringing your Amazon packages to you, those of you who are bringing DoorDash and Uber Eats to you, people who served you in the Costco's and the Sam's Clubs, and even in the local grocery stores, those who are behind the scenes in the e-commerce area, in the warehousing and storage area. All of those were places where jobs were created in the past year. It was a risky period, and it shouldn't be too surprising to find that the insurance area, which is the way that risk is financed, experienced some growth during 2020. It was a good year for housing, a very good year for housing in some areas, building nearly 900,000 new homes, median home prices up nearly 15% year over year in November, according to NAR statistics. Mortgage rates historically low, and the Fed is signaling that they're going to keep them low as long as it takes to get the economy running hot again. There's also plenty of capital out there. Much of it is being reserved as dry powder, and there are signs that the debt funds, and Lou, I hear that you're managing one of them, are ramping up to put that money to work in 2021. So real estate needs to be prepared. It needs to be prepared for recovery, but it needs to be prepared for a long haul. We could see the gross domestic product, a measure of the economy, back to where it was before the pandemic as early as a year from now. But as far as jobs are concerned, I think even optimistically, it's going to be into 2024 and more likely into 2025 if we succeed in adding on average 2 million or 3 million jobs a year. There are going to be quarterly gyrations along these very smooth projection lines, but the bottom line is this: we're not going to be putting 9 million people back to work in the short term. Americans are famously impatient, so we're not going to like this. But we should be reminded of something that was said by the revolutionary Ho Chi Minh. And Ho Chi Minh said, patience is the most revolutionary of virtues. So time is our ally in real estate. It's not our enemy at this point, but it doesn't mean that we should be passive. It's not a time for passivity. I hearken back to my grammar school education where we had think and do books. Here at Fordham, we're working hard at thinking, but it's going to be the industry that's going to be the doing. And so I'm very happy to turn this over to the doers. And I thank Lou for the opportunity to give this little summary.
Well, thank you, Hugh. Hi, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Well, hey, Hugh, thank you. I'd like, unfortunately in life, every once in a while, we have to listen to economists, but Hugh, you did a good job, and numbers are the numbers, but I agree with you, the doers are the doers, and we're going to start some of the questions now. And these questions initially are going to be addressed to all our guests, to Don, Dottie, and Father McShane. And I want each of you, starting with Dottie, to tell us about your journey and what your vision is over the next 5 years, given what we hear and where we've been at and what we're present. I would love to hear what you think, Dottie. You're an eternal optimist.
Oh, my journey is very interesting. I grew up without a mom. My mom died when I was 10, and I was the oldest of 3 children. She died in a car accident when she was 34. So I basically kind of grew up on my own, and I went to school. And when I was in school, I got married. I had my daughter when I was 20, and I needed to make money. So I got divorced then also. So I needed to make money. And while I was finishing, I went back to Adelphi to get certified as a financial planner. I thought, oh my God, I'll be a stockbroker, or I'll get my Series 7. I'll make a lot of money. And one of the universities, Adelphi University, the School of Denver, were giving certificate programs out of being certified as a financial planner. And at the time, really, that was not a regulated field, nor did many people even think about it. And so I went back to school, got certified as a financial planner. And I somehow got Merrill Lynch somehow confused that I was, I don't know if they knew I was in real estate or certified financial planning, but I did real estate part-time so that I could, I was going to school to become a financial planner. And one day my boss, and I said, I'm leaving as soon as I get my Series 7, I complete these 20 courses I had to take. And then he called me and said, listen, don't leave. I said, why not? Because I really had no intentions of staying in real estate. And he said, because Merrill Lynch, and this is going back to the 80s, and Merrill Lynch in the 80s kind of ruled the world. And he said, because Merrill Lynch is buying these companies, real estate companies, and you have a financial background in this and a real estate, and you should just stick it out, which I did. And I found out who the head guy who was started up the real estate division for Merrill Lynch. They decided to try to get multiple income bases from their customers, and so now they sell them a stock. They had a bank give them a mortgage and then sell them a house. And I read in the book, I know that's archaic, but they didn't have internet then. I read in the book that if you want to get somewhere, you got to go. You're better off being like a clerk, but be where the people who make the decisions are. So I found out where the guy who ran the whole division nationally, because it was a national company. I saved my money. I got on a plane. I somehow barged into his office with no appointment. You didn't go see the head of Merrill Lynch with no appointment. And I said, listen, I'm really great. And I read in a book, and I would be great And the guy just looked at me and just started to laugh. And that's how I started with Merrill Lynch and worked for them. I loved working for that company. And P.S., at the end of the day, they eventually decided to sell it. They sold it to Prudential, who said, we don't want to have a national company. We think that real estate is a local thing. We don't believe in national real estate. So we're going to franchise the 350 offices we have in the United States. And I was part of the Northeast division. And P.S., I was so sad. I said, I'm not going to have a job. I need the money. And I loved what I did. And then this person who was like, I don't even know who he was, he said, why don't you buy it? And I said, because I have no money. I don't even think I had $500 or $1,000 then. He said, so what? Just say that you do. And being young is so terrific, because being young, I said, yeah, that's not a bad idea. Let me do that. And we got together with some of the guys and some of the husbands of people I knew, and we put some business plan together. I had no money whatsoever, but I wrote a letter to Merrill saying that I had venture capital money and I had backers behind me, and I wanted to buy some portion of the company. And P.S., I ended up, when I was about 29, borrowing, I believe, about $10 million, something of that, and maybe $2 or $3 million in working capital. I think it was a little under two. No money down, no personal guarantees. I didn't have any. And that's how I started.
It's quite an impressive journey, and I would turn to Mr. Peebles. Don, I know yours is equally. You got to where you were, and you took some different routes in your life, and like to hear about it.
Well, I was born in Washington, D.C. In 1960. So the beginning of the epicenter of the civil rights movement in our country. And so our country was going through a big transformation. My mother had me at 19. My parents got divorced when I was 5, and my mother was a secretary and worked on Capitol Hill in the House of Representatives in a congressional office. And at one point, she bought a house in a suburban area in Maryland, and saw at closing, when she was closing on a new house purchase, she saw, when she signed the closing line, that there was a line item for commission. And she inquired about why was it so much. She just went into a sales center in a subdivision, spent about 30 minutes with them, looking at some plans and walking through a couple models, and then signed a contract. And so she found out, that was a sales agent, and they got a commission, and a broker did. And so she felt she could do it. So she went to school and got her real estate license. And we relocated to Detroit, Michigan, and for about 5 years. And she started in the real estate business there, and then ultimately became a broker and started her own brokerage business, engaged in that business, and had a brokerage business for 4 or 5 years. And then chose to relocate back to Washington, D.C., where she was going to run a sales office in an urban renewal area in D.C. There was no internet, no video conferencing, just phone calls and mail. And so they saw her resume. They hired her after a phone interview. And we relocated to Washington, D.C. in 1973. I was 13. And my mother went to report to work. And at the end of the day, they let her go because they told her that they didn't think the market was ready for an African-American woman to lead the sales office, and that they would have difficulty keeping their agents to have them work for a Black woman. So my mother went back to being a secretary and got a job at Fannie Mae, a temporary job at Fannie Mae. And she was working for a person who was one of the senior people at Fannie Mae. He was a former member of Congress. And after getting to know her a little bit, wondered why she was a secretary with her credentials. Ultimately, he arranged to have her interviewed by the chairman of Fannie Mae. And they hired her as an executive and promoted her as an executive at Fannie Mae, where she worked, and then ultimately went back into entrepreneurship late in my teenage years. And so that experience obviously informed my view on the challenges that women confront and then adding that other element of race, the tremendous challenges that they confronted. And it was a big eye opener for me at 13 years old. And so it kind of shaped me, it did shape me as a person. I also my mother thought I should understand government. So she arranged for me to be a page on Capitol Hill. So the page program back then, you went to school, it was for high school students. You went to school from 6 in the morning until 10:30 at the Library of Congress, top floor of the Library of Congress, and you walked across the street and worked in the US Capitol for a full 8 hours or whenever Congress went out of session. So I did that for my last 2 years of high school, got mentored by people like Tip O'Neill, who was then the Speaker of the House, and Majority Leader Jim Wright. And I also got a chance to meet many African-American leaders as the Congressional Black Caucus was beginning to form. And so transformative leaders like Charlie Rangel, John Conyers, Gus Hawkins, Shirley Chisholm, Barbara Jordan, and others I got a chance to meet. And so that I got to see people of color participating in how our government was run. And I also saw the influence that our government could have. And so after high school, I decided I was going to go and practice medicine. And so I went to Rutgers in a pre-med program. And my plan was to invest in real estate after I made some money practicing medicine. After my first year, I changed my mind. I went back to Washington, D.C. Now, Washington, D.C. had gotten the right to elect its own government in 1974 when I was 14. So I had a chance to work and volunteer on the first governmental elections in Washington, D.C. And I volunteered for a city council member candidate and the chairperson of the city council. Ultimately, the council member that I met ended up becoming mayor of the city in 1978 when I was 18. And so when I got back to Washington, I got more involved in politics and started my own appraisal business, where first I got a job working for my mother and then another company because I wanted to get other experience. And then I started my own appraisal business at 23, and I had contracts with the Department of Housing and Urban Development, Veterans Affairs, and others, and built an appraisal business. And at 23, the mayor appointed me to the Property Tax Appeal Board, which oversees all of the assessments and the appeals process for all properties in Washington, D.C., commercial, residential, et cetera. And then a year later, I was appointed chairperson, which made me one of the most powerful people in commercial real estate in Washington, D.C. at 24. And then I had the idea to redevelop an office building in the lowest income area in Washington, D.C., and build an office building and relocate government workers who provided human services and other services to people in that community, to relocate them from downtown in a more expensive office space into a new building we would build that would stimulate jobs and economic development, but also bring them closer to the communities that they served, and then also save the government money. So the mayor agreed to pre-lease a building for me, from us for that purpose, which enabled me to go out and get it financed, got it financed, brought in partners and who were 50-50 partners with us. That was my first deal and I was 26, developed that building. My son actually just renovated the building and released it to the government for another 16 years. That was a 100,000 square foot building. From that one opportunity I got, we ended up owning millions of square feet in Washington, D.C., and billions of dollars of real estate. And today our company has projects in 8 different markets. We have a pipeline of about $4 billion in development projects, and projects are in Boston, New York City, Washington, D.C., Charlotte, North Carolina, South Florida, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Las Vegas, and other places. And as a company, we committed from day one to economic inclusiveness. And so we as a company throughout our history have done over 25% of all of our contracts with minority and women-owned businesses. And now our company's goal is 35% of all of our contracts to be provided to minority and women-owned businesses. And one of the things I'm most proud of is when we won the rights from the New York City Economic Development Corporation for a building called 346 Broadway, we committed to 20% MWBE contracting. And the New York City Economic Development Corporation didn't believe we could do it because their own government wasn't doing, they were doing less than 5% themselves. And we finished that building up, and we're going to be right around 30% So my driving force here is that it's good business to be inclusive. You get a better product. You can be much more impactful if you look to make affirmative steps to level the playing field. The biggest problem with our industry, why we are so despised in New York City, is that we basically go into communities and occupy them. We gentrify them, and we take the economic benefits are given to people who come in and leave and are not a part of the communities. And they do not reflect the population demographics of New York City. All you have to do is look at the who's who in commercial real estate, and you would think you are in, Salt Lake City, Utah, not America's most diverse city. And that is a problem for our industry, and that's a failing of leadership in the industry and governmentally as well. And so as a company, though, we believe that that is the future. Inclusiveness will drive much greater impact and results. And in this day with a new administration, I believe that there will be tremendous expectations for that. And our industry is going to be at the forefront of leading our country into recovery. But that's how I started. That's my driving principle. And that's what gets me going every day.
Well, thank you, Don. And I can transition to Father McShane, who has a front row seat, box seats to what's been going on in the city. Very principled human being, and I'm curious to not only hear the father's story, but to hear his comments on some of the things you said. Go ahead, Father.
Thank you very much, and I apologize in advance. My story is really downright boring in comparison with the two stories that we've heard. I was born and raised 3 miles from where I now live and have my main office. So I was raised in the Marble Hill section of the city. My father was a State Department civil servant. He was the special agent in charge of security for the Mid-Atlantic states, the United States Department of State. He himself was the son of 2 Irish immigrants. He, unlike many in his generation, he had the benefit of really a very focused emphasis on education within his family. So he went to first the local parish grammar school, then Xavier High School, then to Fordham College. Then he taught and coached basketball. I know you'll find this hard to believe, at Power Memorial, but between 1932 and 1941. And he went to Columbia at night to get a master's in classics and then Fordham Law. And then went to work for the government, first in the Army and then after that in the State Department. My mother was also the child of 2 Irish immigrants, but, and both of them, by the way, were born and raised initially in Hell's Kitchen before Hell's Kitchen was, it's no longer Hell's Kitchen, really. It's Hell's Penthouse at this point, if we're being honest with one another on what that is like now. She had to leave high school. She never finished high school. She had to leave high school to help support her family. She and her oldest brother had to do it at the same time. So she had a rough go of it. Interestingly enough, of my 2 parents, both of whom loved education, my mother was much more focused on it. She was passionate about education. And for her, education meant certain things. And I'll get into that in a second. So that's the background from which I came. As I said, I lived in Marble Hill. I went to the local parish grammar school, and then from there, I went to a Jesuit high school on the Upper East Side. And then my life really takes a very, very prosaic turn. After becoming a Jesuit, I followed Jesuit formation. So I had 2 years in Poughkeepsie, took vows, 3 years in Boston at BC, getting a bachelor's and master's degree in philosophy and English. And then 2 years in Syracuse, in Buffalo, where I taught in our high school in Buffalo, and then 3 years in Berkeley, where I studied theology. And then I had a year on Long Island, on the Gold Coast, in Manhasset, and then went off to graduate school at the University of Chicago. And I was a very determined young Jesuit. I determined from a very young age that I would train for obsolescence. So I got a PhD in church history. So I united the 2 areas in which students had the least interest, history and organized religion. So I thought this was really crazy, and it was crazy. Then I did 11 years teaching at our small college in Syracuse, a place called Lemoyne. I was deliriously happy there for 11 years. And then I was asked if I would be willing to put my name in for the deanship of Fordham College, which is now Fordham College at Rose Hill. Since my father had gone there and my brothers had gone there, I said, sure, it would give me an opportunity to come and have a few interviews in New York to see my mom. My father had died by this time. And much to my amazement, the guy who trained for obsolescence was hired to be the dean of the college. Now, this is where things did become interesting. Both Dottie and Don will remember, I came to Fordham in 1992. So it was a period of time that was at the end of the period where the Bronx was burning, and a period of great challenge for colleges and universities within the city. And to give you a sense of how challenging things were, my first year in the dean's office, we had about 4,000 applications for admission, and our freshman class was 941 in 3 colleges spread over 2 campuses, Lincoln Center and Rose Hill. We had to let go of people. We had to close buildings. We had to scrimp on every expense that we could imagine to get through. So it was a rough time, and I learned a lot at that point about higher education and how higher education had to act if it wanted to have a future. And really it was a moment or a period of time in which I learned that you have to evolve, and in order to evolve, you have to have grit, determination, and a willingness to observe and listen. Observe what's going on and listen to what people need, what people's aspirations are. That, of course, is a lesson that Fordham had learned over time. Fordham will be 180 years old this year. And from the very beginning, we've had to evolve, and we've had to evolve precisely by listening to and really meeting people where they were. Even though as a Jesuit institution, we would offer a traditional classical education, all of that, that's true, but we had to adapt. We had to develop new programs. Our law school was founded for a specific reason, and that reason was that Catholics were not admitted to law schools elsewhere, so we started one. And we quickly became the place where people who were not accepted elsewhere because of their religious or ethnic background would find a legal education. School of Business, founded in response to a real felt need. We briefly had a school of medicine, and then we opened pharmacy. So we were always adapting and evolving by listening to and leaning into change. In the 90s, we learned that anew. We had to repackage ourselves, and this is also something that we learned, and it's coming back to us. We had to find new markets. And it's not just finding new markets, it's identifying the markets, giving yourself to the work of opening the market. And we know it takes about 10 years for a college or a university to really establish itself in a new market. But we had to develop new programs, not just the old tried and trues. So our business school began to evolve very, I would say, smartly. And Anthony has been a part of the evolution, really, of the business enterprise, or the enterprise of the business school. So I was there 6 years, and then I went to the University of Scranton, where, to be honest with you, I never met President Biden, but I worked with his cousins, who were Scrantonians still. I was there for 5 years, and then I was invited back to Fordham to serve in the position I now have. And I came back there in 2003. I'm in my 18th year now. And what I learned in the 90s, I had to not relearn, but learn in a new way. And that is that education to survive is going to have to evolve. It has to evolve in ways that involve listening, being attentive to, if possible, market not only responsive, but market anticipatory. And this is where, our history, our heritage is very important. You all know one of our most famous graduates is Mario Gabelli. Mario Gabelli has been very good to Fordham, as you all know. And our business school is named for him. Mario has a habit of stopping in and visiting with our freshmen every year. in the Gabelli School of Business. And he says, I have no interest in having anyone here who is not a PhD. You can imagine the shock that causes in the hearts of these freshmen in college. And he said, if you're not PhD, I have no interest in you at all. He has their attention and he says, poor, hungry, and driven. That's what I want, and that's what I was, and that's what I remain, no matter what you think of me. Poor, hungry, and driven. Which gets me to some of the observations that Don and Dottie made. New York is great because it has always been the home. Don underscored this a few times, the most diverse city on the face of the earth. This is absolutely true. Everyone, as Michael Bloomberg used to say, everyone's second home. No matter what they think of America at any given time, they all love New York because it's everyone's second home. It's where talent can be tested and hope can be born. But talent is tested among those who they're poor when they arrive. And the people who are in the inner cities of New York City, and let's be honest, our inner city it's not the same from borough to borough or even part of a borough to another part of a borough. These are the young women and men who will make America great. It's young women and men who made America great all along. You know, the PhDs, the poor, hungry, and driven, filled with talent, eager to find their place at the American table, looking as Dottie was with grit for a way in. We have to believe that. That's the genius of America. It's not the genius of a meritocracy or an inherited class, a class of inherited wealthy people. The hope of America has always been its ability to spark something in the human heart among those who want a place at the table. And for us in higher education, we have to be aware of that, and we have to, in a certain sense, and I don't mean this in a negative way, we have to cater to and respond to it. And we have to bring people in. And for my part, Lou, one of the great things that higher education does, there are two things. One, education is the greatest work of empowerment that the human mind has ever conceived of. Number two, higher education is a huge, huge industry. In the city of New York, I don't know if you know this, the colleges and universities of New York City educate 660,000 students every year, 660,000. Boston calls itself College Town, USA. Boston only has 600,000 people. New York has 660,000 college students in institutions that employ 181,000 people. We are a big industry. We're the only industry that doesn't exist for itself. It exists to prepare young women and men for careers and meaningful lives in other professions. And so one of the things I'm going to end with this, for us to be successful in doing our job, which is making lives, purposeful lives possible, we have to listen to you. We have to learn to listen to the signs of the times and the desires of the human heart and the aspirations that you have, so that we can prepare people for jobs in the industries that we seek to serve. So with that, I'll end. And Don and Dottie, my hat goes off to you. Your lives are much more interesting and I would say filled with drama than mine. Mine's a dull Jesuit life. My gosh, it's no wonder I wear black all the time.
Well, thank you, Father McShane, and thank you all for insights. And I'm going to toss out some 30-second kind of things, some quick kind of rapid response. We have a lot of questions, and quite honestly, I could sit here and listen to any one of you about anything for the rest of the panel, but that doesn't serve us well. So the first question I'm going to start with Don. What skill set will be in the most demand over the next 5 years? What skill set in your business are you looking for?
I mean, I'm looking for people who are hardworking, high level of integrity, and a willingness to learn. So, and who are also smart people, but mainly those skill sets, the willingness to learn, the willingness to work hard and operate from a perspective of integrity. Those are very important aspects. I mean, real estate's a very broad business, and we're a pretty active company. So we are looking for people who, can run numbers, who can have practical on the ground development experience, but it's mainly the willingness to work hard, the willingness to learn, but to operate with a perspective of integrity, because we find that ultimately people work harder when they're working for a greater purpose than money. And we as a company with our affirmative development are working for a greater purpose than just money.
Dottie, you'd like to add to that?
Sure. I think one of the most beautiful things about real estate is that it really, being successful is not about your degree. It's not about what school you went to. It's not about who your parents were. It's about, I think, as Don said, that inner drive, that inner part of you that wants to work hard, knows that there's no easy place to get on the top, and is willing to fall down. I have a thing in my office that says success is failure turned inside out. And for those people who are afraid to fail, they can never be successful. They never fail because they don't do anything. So it's one of the professions that if you really, really want to, and you're willing to work hard, and you're willing to know that it's just not an easy road. People read about people when they are successful. Okay. And then, they look and see, oh, look at that person. Well, they must have known someone. They must have had this guy. What they don't look, and if you look at Don, myself, or any successful entrepreneur, if you go back and look at how they got there, they fell a million times, picked themselves up, got back into it again. And it was just no easy street. So I think people are always going to want to buy homes or rent office space and things of that nature. And of course, in the years I've been in the business, which is a long time, we've had our ups and our downs, but people are always going to have a place to live. And so it's not something that's ever going to go out. I think you have to be entrepreneurial, though. I think you really have to have that ability, and that drive. But I think that's like 50% of it, maybe more. It's not always, like I tell my daughter, and I always tell people, it's not always the smartest person that wins. It's not always the girl that has the best voice that gets to be the star. It's someone who's willing to just keep on going, fall, cry a little, get back up in the ring, pick themselves up, and not be afraid. And I will emphasize this of the word no. And don't let people tell you how you can't do something. And I'm sure that, Don, you've encountered that in your life. I know I've encountered all the people who told me how I couldn't do it. Don't listen to those people. Be around people that are positive.
Father McShane, your PhD story, I'm going to have to use that. I know it wasn't originally yours, but I think it makes a ton of sense, even in my own business. One thing that might be lost on our audience and our fellow panelists is you're in education and you're in religious studies, but you also run a massive operation. And what skill sets, do you see a change in skill sets or a different needed skill set as you hire people for the operation of Fordham University?
Well, that's an interesting question. I want to build on what both Dottie and Don have said. When we hire, we're looking for people who are women and men of great integrity. You have to have a strong moral compass in any job, but in education especially so, I think. And I hope no one's insulted when I say especially in higher education. Second, both Dottie and Don got at issues and skills that are very important. One is resilience and the other is persistence. There has to be resilience. If you're knocked down and you retire from the field, come on, go back to grammar school and remember that when you failed in a safe setting so that you'd learn from the failure and move on, move up, be stronger. So resilience and persistence, I think, are very, very important. The other thing is we will prepare students with certain skill sets that we believe are needed. The most important, of course, is we want to teach them how to think. We don't want to teach them what to think. We want to teach them how to think, how to master the art of the question, how to fall in love with something and run with it. So that would be the major thing. We want to make them lifelong learners who know how to think and think something through. The next thing that I think we need is, let's be honest, did anybody on the call anticipate Amazon? You know, when he started selling books? No.
No.
You know, and therefore, you know, I think we have to teach, it's not a skill, it's an understanding that life is broken field running more than it is a straight path. It's never going to be easy. And if it is easy, you're probably doing it wrong or you're settling. So it's not so much skills, it's attitudes, I think, what three of us are talking about. With regard to skills, let's be honest, we have to prepare students for a technologically rich environment for the rest of their lives. And a technologically rich environment, which is going to be evolving at a faster pace than they can imagine. And therefore, it would be wrong for us to tell you, get your first job and you're going to spend your life there. That'd be a lie. And it goes back to the resilience and persistence. But the other is adaptability. You know, an attitude which will adapt. The one thing, and I want to turn to the experts on this, and they are Don and Dottie. The one thing I don't even have a clue as to where entrepreneurial skill comes from. Is it inborn or can you teach it? That is, for me, one of the great mysteries, ranking right up there with transubstantiation and the Holy Trinity. Where does the entrepreneurial heart or mind come from and how is it developed? Because that's where the drive is. Who used the word drive before? I think both did. And Mary Gabelli, you know, the last thing, poor, hungry, driven. Where's the drive and the cleverness, the insightful heart that allows a person to see a way forward? Lou, those are the things I would throw out. And they're really riffs on what was said before, but I really am perplexed by and stand in awe of entrepreneurial types.
Well, Father, that's a great question. Better than the questions I came up with. So I'll ask Don or Dottie to jump in and is entrepreneurialism learned? Are you born with it? Are you exposed to it? Why does it happen? Dottie?
I don't know. I think we've wrestled with that question quite a bit. I'm not sure if anyone has the exact answer, but I will say this because people many times ask me, well, gee, do you think anything had to do with your mother? And the truth is, I was the oldest. As I said, my mom died when I was 10. My dad was driving the car, so he kind of lost it. It was not really there. And I had no one tell me the word no. Like I just kind of grew up doing whatever I did. And I'd say to my friends, oh, come to my house. We can stay out late. We can do this. And if I had a mom, if my mom was alive, I would have never been able to do half the things I did. And I'm not saying they were all so great, but the fact is I had to make decisions for myself. And I kind of look at today, and maybe this might sound old fashioned, but I watch with the kids today, everything is planned. A planned play date, a planned this, a planned that, a planned this. And I think that part of being an entrepreneur is kind of just somebody who's in the present and somebody who just goes out there, and you have to have that passion. I don't think anyone is successful at something really if they're not passionate. And you have to work, you have to understand, as kids, if you touch a stove, they tell you no, don't touch it. But it's like a little kid that's trying to learn how to walk and they fall, but they pick them up. I think that I can tell you for me, I heard the word no millions of times. I've dealt with the gender issue a million times, and I certainly have failed. I could write a book. but it's a matter of resilience, drive, and passion, and that willing to just find a way. And if there's a stop sign and you can't go straight, you figure out a way to go around it. So that's kind of what I think. And I don't know that you were born with it or not. I think it's a drive within yourself and a passion within your heart.
Right.
I've got a perspective of that. I've written 2 books, one a bestseller, The People's Principles. And the reason I wrote The People's Principles is back in, I guess it would have been 2005, 2006, I was traveling on a project we were working on in San Francisco. And I came from the East Coast. It was, 3 hours earlier there. So I was trying to get on the time zone. So I ordered dinner in my hotel room and turned on CNN. And it was Larry King interviewing our former president, who wasn't president at the time, Donald Trump. And he asked the very question that the father just asked. Is entrepreneurship, he asked Trump, and Larry King did, is entrepreneurship born, or do you have it from birth, or do you develop it? Can you develop as an entrepreneur? And Trump said that you were born with it. You either have it or you're not. You're a winner or you're not. You're born that way. And I listened to this show, and I thought to myself, this is really, a disservice in some regards. And by the way, I know him, and he's a nice enough person, et cetera. But I thought people will listen to this and they'll actually believe this. And it's wrong, because I thought about myself. I grew up in a government town. I worked in government in high school. I wanted to be a doctor. I was going to go into politics after practicing medicine and invest passively in real estate. My father was a file clerk for the federal government and a part-time auto mechanic. And I told you the story of my mother. My maternal grandfather was a hotel doorman for 41 years at a hotel that I probably couldn't have stayed in when I was born. My paternal grandfather was a janitor in the segregated South at a school that his kids could not attend because of segregation. So I was an unlikely entrepreneur, and there I was in California working on a project that I owned that was going to be over $1 billion. And so I felt I had an obligation to correct this. And so I wrote a book about entrepreneurship, because I believe that life and our life experiences and the necessity of action dictate what we become. And, and with the grace of God, we get the good fortune to see opportunities when they present themselves sometimes. But I was an entrepreneur because I happened to be in a situation where I did not want to go to medical school anymore. And I had to figure out a way to earn a living. And once I quit school and didn't have a degree, I was unemployable. So I had to become something else. And so that's where the resilience comes in. That's where the drive comes in. And so can a lazy person be an entrepreneur? No. Can a person who's willing to settle be an entrepreneur? No. But if entrepreneurs are created by life experiences every day, and women and minorities are creating more small businesses. In fact, Black women are forming 30% rather of the new small businesses in this country. And it's not because there's this, and they're the highest demographic of any racial or gender demographic creating new businesses. It's not because all of a sudden Black women have innately developed this genetic element of being entrepreneurs. It's because they can't get employed elsewhere. They cannot pursue their dreams and their goals and strive to be the head of companies or to work their way up from the counter, the front desk, to running the hotel, or working their way up from the mailroom to running the company. they can take their lives in their own hands. So entrepreneurs are created. You can create yourself as an entrepreneur, and the most unlikely people become entrepreneurs because of life circumstances. And ideas that are out of the box create entrepreneurs as well. So, I mean, I think, again, you know, it's something that we all have in us to the degree we want to do it.
Let me switch up some gears a second. Another couple of questions for me, and then we're going to go to some audience questions. One of my thoughts was that, you know, private-public cooperation in the economy, in the formation of businesses, you know, things like opportunity zones, things like Fannie Mae, which ones are working? You know, we are facing, every place you read, tremendous deficits, tremendous government spending, and probably part of the division in our nation right now is some of the legitimate disagreements with capitalism, pure capitalism versus more socialism. But I think we all can come together that we want to achieve the goals that better society. What role should the government have going forward, and how should it be interacting with private sectors? And what are some of your experience and opinions? I'm going to start with you, Father.
Well, I'm going to give a little commercial break. I don't know if any of you have read Peter Georgescu's book, Capitalists Arise. I recommend it. It's, you know, he was young and Rubicon's, you know, guy for the longest time. It does reflect on this. You know, that is one of the biggest questions. It's one of the questions that the newly installed President of the United States is going to have to deal with in a major way. What is the role of government? What is the way in which private enterprise and government should interact? Catholic social teaching would say that unbridled capitalism is not a good idea, nor is socialism, you know, rank socialism a good idea. You have to find middle ground. And I probably believe that in some ways. Listening to Dottie and Don convinced me that, you know, capitalism can be an outlet of great creativity and great, I have to say, we didn't mention this before, it can be the opportunity for the exercise of great civic virtue. And I think, Don, you were kind of hinting at that before. Civic virtue is a very important thing, and it's not, I think, as valued as it should be. But back to the question. In a period of crisis, I think obviously the government has a greater role to play in fostering the growth of businesses, fostering the more equitable, you know, distribution of wealth and so on. When the economy is you know, kind of chugging along at a good pace, there's less need for government intervention, except in those instances where, you know, opportunity is not available and they have to really do a corrective. I want to refer back to Don's thing, you know, that we have to be careful. We have to be attentive, not careful. We have to be attentive to the needs of people and understand that the economy exists for people, not the other way around. And that's one of the reasons I like Georgescu's book. And you have to, you know, you begin with the great treasure is the human being. And you want to make sure that your economic systems value the human being as the treasure, and that the systems are focused on advancing the life and the dignity of the human being. Again, in moments of disruption, and I think we are, obviously, you know, as Hugh's stats showed us before, we're in a moment of extraordinary disruption. I think the government is going to have, for several years, a greater role than it has had, except at catastrophic times in the past. You know, the Great Depression would be one. 2008 would be another, although we thought 2008 was horrible, but 2008 is not horrible in comparison to what we're seeing now. So I think right now, to ask what's the role, I think the role of government is greater and will be greater. I think that government should foster the growth of jobs and industries insofar as it's possible for it to do it, and always watch out for, you know, the people, the workers, and the citizens. that they're elected to serve. So that's, that's kind of off the top of my head. I both apologize and don't apologize for the fact that really my answer is rooted in Catholic social teaching. And those things that companies will not do, the government should do: subsidiarity and proper delegation of authority. So.
Dottie, would you like to add to that or have a comment?
Sure. And I make it my business, unless I'm with people that I know I can fight with and argue with. And I think that we're lucky to be in a country where hopefully people have the right to disagree. But I personally, it's kind of a tricky question, but I do think that, number one, everybody should have a right to an education. I mean, I don't think that, if your father doesn't have, everyone should have a right to be educated. I know as a woman, there's so many single moms and much harder to get ahead. And I'm in a few women's organizations where the capital, as far as capital in minorities and women, where people invest in them and give them venture capital, is really like, I think it was like around, don't quote me exactly, but it was like 5%. So definitely, like, there's not an equal, it's better, but it's not an equal playing field. And I really, when I kind of read my story, and I never really thought about it. Everything just kind of happened. And one time I was doing something for entrepreneurship, and I took this book out. I bought all these books. It was very many years ago. I was first starting to speak. And after I read all the books, I'm like, but I didn't do it this way. But I did have people in my life. I had worked with Prudential because Merrill sold to Prudential. And it just so happened that a woman that ran all of Prudential, there were very few women at Merrill Lynch, very few men, women, and especially, it was really a good old boys club. This woman, her name was Jean Hamilton, and I will never forget it. She took me under her wing, and when I was looking to borrow the money, I don't think I would have ever gotten it. It's just that she was around. She knew who I was because there weren't many people who had big franchises. And she pushed the people that worked for her to fund me. So I did have a break. I like to encourage people to get out of the box and go to different things and meet different people, because I think people tend to kind of stay in their box. That's kind of why I like New York City, because it's very diverse and, you get everything in life. But I think there's certain things that we should all have, but I don't think that someone's going to succeed or not succeed. I mean, I think everyone should have the opportunity. Whether they succeed or not doesn't mean if you have the opportunity, you'll succeed. You still have to have all the things that Don said and I said and the father said, but everyone should be able to get into the game.
Hey, Dottie, can I ask you a question? Because you're in a perfect position to maybe have an opinion on this. I'm in the business, and when we look at doing a loan, for instance, and maybe it's on an apartment building somewhere in the country, we're always looking at demographics. We're looking at demand generators, and we're looking at the general health of the market from the terms of people wanting to live there. And it could be workforce housing, it could be luxury housing, it could be moderate housing. Do you think that when we look at some of the problems, particularly in New York City right now, are people driven by fear of crime in the city?
Say that again?
Are people driven by fear of crime in New York City, or fear of catching the virus? Which one is more perverse and
I would tell you that it's both. I think in March, people fled the city to suburbs and just to escape the virus, because we got hit very hard in New York City, and it's very dense and everything is high rises, and there's all, public transportation is a way around. So I think initially they did to escape that. I look at New York City now when I go back, and it's not even the virus. There's a lot more crime, at least that I see. I have this app, I think it's called Citizens for a Safer New York, and it alerts you every time there's something going on. And That is always something. I think that people are afraid of the safety. I also think that nothing to do with New York or government or anything, but I think that this pandemic, people were on lockdown so long they got stuck. They're in their homes. And so they had all this time. And so they, they want more space and home offices. I think it will never go back to the way it was where you work every day. It'll be a combination of being home and not. So I think people will work from home and they'll need more space. But I tell everyone, if you're a smart person, not that you should, but the people, if you really look at people who made money in real estate, I'm not talking about the families and the kids that will inherit it all at all. They all bought in bad markets. And so there is opportunity. And even though everyone says, look, I see what's going on in New York, and it's younger people coming in that were priced out of New York because the landlords have to make deals now. And so it just affords an opportunity for people because if you go back, Don, you'll know this, before the pandemic, the prices really as far had peaked. I mean, and so I think it's a correction, but I think people are afraid of it. They're also looking for safety. So I think safety for everybody is a key, is key. And
that's great. We're going to go ahead, Don.
I would like to go back to the issue of the role of government. I think that is a fundamental element of where we are as a society, and what is some of the challenges. So when I opened our office in New York in 2011, I met with the then head of the Real Estate Board of New York, Steve Spinola, and I told Steve Roth of Renato that the model that you have in New York is unsustainable. Your lack of diversity is appalling. That it is not sustainable, that you're in a city that's nearly 70% minority, and yet you have this great concentration of wealth. And with that concentration of wealth comes concentration of opportunity. And that overall, you got to understand the political dynamics. And they've been lulled to sleep by Mike Bloomberg, who was willing to spend whatever it took to get elected for 12 years, 3 terms, who was a business person who brought New York out of 9/11, and the city was willing to, and residents were willing to make all kinds of compromises to rebuild the city. But they were looking for, you had stop and frisk, and and the city was looking for opportunity for all. And so this great concentration of wealth and opportunity led to a political revolution in New York that's still ongoing. And it's shifted extremely far to the left, to the point they rejected Amazon bringing jobs to Long Island City, that they have elected people who are far left, and they're looking at all kinds of tax policies that will essentially structure a distribution of wealth, the attempt to. And that's because government abdicated its role. Government's not a business. The private sector is a business, and entrepreneurs, as much as we would like them to be idealistic, and business leaders and CEOs, we'd like them to be good corporate citizens and be idealistic. The greed factor normally, seduces and overwhelms the vast majority of entrepreneurs. So they want to keep it to themselves, and they want to make as much money as they can. So the government leadership is the one that draws the line. And it says to funds like all these major investment and asset managers, if you want to manage money for New York State Public Employees Pension System or New York City's Public Employee Pension System, where the contributors of this pension system are over 53% female and 55 or 60% minority, that's their money that you're investing, you need to deploy the capital to businesses that are reflective of the investor's money. You need to hire, and your workforce in your company needs to be reflective of the population demographics in our city. If not, you can't have our money. If you want to build Hudson Yards and you want a $2 billion subsidy for the subway, and you want the public that is 69% minority and 53% female to finance it for you, then the jobs and economic opportunities generated by those projects ought to be reflective of the people paying for the opportunity for you in the first place. But that doesn't happen because the political people and the government leaders don't have any business judgment. They're asleep at the wheel and they allow this to happen. But if you look at cities, I mean, not everybody's having these problems that New York is having. And by the way, it's going to get worse and worse because of a concentration of wealth, it puts the burden of taxes on a smaller group of people. And
You're leaving.
And they're extremely mobile. They can live anywhere in the world, and technology has shown us that. And COVID has shown us by force that we all have to interact and do business this way. So people can do business from anywhere in the world. I'm in Florida right now, in Wellington, where my daughter's riding horses. So, and so people, wealthy people are leaving. Businesses are leaving too. And that will put greater burden on the businesses and people who stay in New York. And so, but Washington, D.C. has a very strong Black middle class, a very strong Black business class. Atlanta does. I mean, Charlotte, North Carolina, you have other places that are doing that. And so the government has this role, and you're going to see it. Business is going to change. I've known the president for 40 years. He means what he says about a more inclusive economy. And so the government's role is to set the tone. Opportunities should be provided to all based upon merit. And that because opportunities have been denied to a large group of people, the majority of our population, which is female, and the minority population, that means you've got to work harder to provide those opportunities. And the government should require anyone who wants to do business within its domain to be inclusive. And that starts with building permits. I mean, all kinds of things, but it's a mindset, an expectation. And if you're going to give allocations of capital to the big firms that have had it and had it their way all this time, then you won't change anything. But the government's role is to be the initiator of the economic inclusiveness. And if they don't do that, then what you have is a widening disparity of income. And so the government has to play a very key role in that. And that is why, I mean, I think it's all good that we've elected President Biden, but in terms of our quality of life, in terms of opportunities for people, it's the municipal and the state levels that matter most. The comptroller of New York is an elected official. The comptroller of New York City is an elected official. The mayor of New York, the governor of New York State. Those people have much more influence in terms of how we live, where we do business, and what kind of environment we have to operate. And do we get a fair system? And no one can say that a system that we have today is fair because we look at women and how underrepresented they are, and we look at minorities and how underrepresented they are. So we know that there is a systemic form of discrimination when it comes to allocation of capital and when it comes to allocation of opportunity. And we can't sit back and wait for Goldman Sachs to decide, hey, we're going to be real inclusive tomorrow. The government has to impose that on them.
Hey, Don, we have only 5 minutes left, and I was hoping maybe you were going to give Fordham the advance notice that you're throwing your hat in the ring to run.
Oh, no, I mean, we've got some good candidates out there. And Ray McGuire's a great candidate, and I think we've got some the public has some good alternatives. I mean, look, all of us should think about public service, but all of us as business people, and we should not do the most expedient. I mean, business is all built, unfortunately, on efficiency. And so,
okay, given I have a due required respect for TV producers. I've never done one of these Zoom calls at this level. We have a few minutes left, and we have one question from the audience, and I'm going to ask you to use this question for your closing statements before we end. And it's just a very simple question from a student, and I think it hits at the heart. What are the future opportunities for recent college graduates in New York City real estate? I ask you to take each maybe a minute and a half, give your thoughts on that in your closing statements, and then I want to thank you all for participating today. Why don't we start with Dottie?
Oh, well, that's real estate's a big, big field. That's certainly it's certainly big in business. Real estate is a big business in the city. I think that if they can, because resumes are one thing, I would get out. I would write to people. People write to me through my Facebook or things, young people all the time. And, I would try to meet some people also, I think. Uh, we don't have time for it, but Don, what you said, really, I couldn't say it any better. And I'm not sure how we fix that, but the opportunities really have to be there for people. And but I know for myself, like anyone's welcome to get a hold of me personally. I'm always open to that. People help me out of my life, and so I'm there.
Good.
And I think like Don and other people, don't be afraid to reach out.
Well, I'm going to go to Don next for his kind of closing statement and I'm going to wait last for Father McShane so he knows that when I go to church on Sunday, I do stay until the end of Mass. I just want that to be confirmed. Go ahead, Don.
I believe that while our country and our world has had tremendous challenges, I believe we are going to and are beginning to embark on a time of great opportunity. No greater place of opportunity do I believe than New York City. I believe that New York City is going to go through a difficult time for the next couple of years of recalibrating and redefining the city that it will be, in the next 50 years and what it will be and how it will get there. And that will present a tremendous opportunity. I believe that the real estate industry as a whole is one of great opportunity because the barriers are low to enter. You can start off with no money and you can build a business as large or small as you want it to be. And this industry will be much more receptive to diversity. And there are going to be great opportunities in the public sector. And so I would look at real estate as a career in New York or other places around the country. And the nice thing about real estate is that you can make it whatever you want it to be. I'm a guest commentator on Fox, CNBC, and CNN. I will have been on all the 3 of those cable networks this week. I've been doing that for about 10, 12 years now. I've written 2 books. I go and do speaking opportunities like this. And I also get to build some exciting projects and practice my version of affirmative development by being inclusive. And so it's allowed me the personal satisfaction to be able to do the things and give some meaning to my life and a sense of greater purpose to my career. So I encourage younger people to get your education. It proves to you and to others that you are capable of seeing things through and that you're willing to work hard and handle some tough circumstances. And then go out here into the world with the great optimism that there's going to be a bright future ahead, because it will be, and you can make your future what you want it to be. And I've had the privilege of doing that. So you're hearing it from someone who actually has done that. So great years ahead.
Absolutely. And I'm going to first, before I hand it over to Father McShane, I want to thank Dottie and I want to thank Don. And I hope you guys will put the word out for Fordham, put the word out for our Scholarship 250. Many colleges should be doing this around the nation. And I'm going to ask Father McShane to have the last words today. It's been a privilege and an honor to be involved in this in a small way. And I think it would be all to our benefit to hear perhaps Father McShane's closing statements. And I appreciate his participation because I know he's busy like the rest of us.
Thank you very much, Lou. I want to thank you for moderating, and you, Kelly, for giving us kind of a framework of statistical information to help us. I want to also, in a very special way, thank Dottie and Don. It's been a great honor to have you here this afternoon with us, and it's an honor for Fordham to be associated with you. I'm going to say things briefly, I hope, which is hard for a Jesuit to do. Normally, we can't clear our throats in less than 20 minutes. Number one, what Dottie and Don said is true. New York will continue to be the land of opportunity. New York will continue to reinvent itself. It will reinvent itself because of the insights the persistence, the resilience, the creativity, the entrepreneurial skill of the people who are drawn here to test themselves against what the city offers. So that's the first. Second, is there a future for commercial and residential real estate in New York? Yes. But I would say this, listening to the two experts we've had with us, you should expect insights and opportunities from the unexpected areas of life. And you can see opportunity in neighborhoods. Not all opportunity. Manhattan does not have a monopoly on opportunity. And therefore, be aware of opportunities, be open to opportunities. Third, New York's present, its history, its present, and its future will be built on people. And therefore, you have to be attentive to people. You have to invest in people. Both of the experts we had with us today, basically doffed their hats or tipped their hats to people. So invest in people. Just as you're going to see opportunities for, a building or for development in unexpected places, and invest in those. Invest in the people who will really present themselves to you. The fourth is this, and I said it poorly before, I think you should bring in Dick Ravitch to talk at one of these, because Dick is one of those people who has done it all, seen it all, learned an enormous amount, and he has great practical wisdom to impart and great stories to tell. And the stories frequently, contain the practical wisdom. And this is one of the reasons I mentioned this, and it picks up on what Don said. We have to have a renewal of political life, a renewal of civic life, not only in the city of New York, but around the country, which means that we have to have a new understanding of what responsibilities the government has to us and what responsibilities we have to the government. There has to be a rebirth in that area. And at Fordham, what we try to do is we try to educate young women and men whose lives are marked by character, competence, conscience, compassion, and a commitment to the cause of the human family. That's what we want to do. That's the kind of person we want to educate. I would add a final C, men and women whose lives are marked by civic virtue that is conspicuous and effective. So with that, I again thank both Dottie and Don.
Thank you.
I tip my hat to Lou and to Hugh as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
And
Thank
stay
you.
safe.
Yes.
Safe.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Get the vaccine.
Yeah.